July has come and gone. These are the 5 biggest stories that impacted Xbox. Somehow, the month of July has steamrolled its way through and gone by, and now we're into August, which means it's time to take a look back at the 5 biggest stories that impacted Xbox in the month of July. And just as a more kind of overhead note, as we wrap up July and move into August, that means we are steamrolling once again towards the holiday shopping season, which means things are going to get a little bit more dynamic as we go forward. So anyways, let's kick it off with the 5 biggest stories that happened in July. Number 5 being Flight Simulator launches on the Xbox. There's a couple reasons why this is a really big deal. First off, this is a title that fully leaves behind, at least for now, the Xbox One, which means it's a true quote-unquote next generation or current generation title, as we should probably call it now, and it is doing quite well. I think there was a couple minor hiccups with bugs and quite literally just using controllers and keyboards, but it kicked off pretty well, and I've played it quite a bit, and I think this is going to be a killer title for Microsoft for the long term. There's a good creator economy ability in this type of a title, and Microsoft has a huge following for Flight Sim, and the fact that they were able to take it from the PC and bring it to the Xbox in relatively short fashion is a really big deal. The most interesting thing about this is that it did not launch through the cloud game streaming on day one, which is something Microsoft is pushing for with most of its titles. We don't know exactly why, but it could be related to the fact that there's not Xbox Series X boards in all the data centers yet. We know that they're mostly there and they're streaming some from there, but not everything might be flowing through that quite yet. Anyways, really big title. This is a huge win for Microsoft, and it's another premier title that goes into the Game Pass bucket that is going to help elevate that service that Microsoft is trying to push so much. On the other side, things a little less green, if you will. Xbox supply is going to continue to be quite hard to find. According to Amy Hood, this comes in at number 4, and she is the CFO over at Microsoft, and she's saying, hey, look, Xbox console supply is going to be continued to be strained through the next quarter, although they are predicting that there's going to be a double-digit growth in the overall Xbox org revenue for that quarter, which means that they're looking at, hey, things are going to be on the up and up and things should continue to grow, but it may not come in the terms of hardware. We don't quite know yet how many Xboxes Microsoft has on order that will actually arrive during the next quarter. So if you're looking to buy one and you're still having trouble, it doesn't look like it's going to be any easier. So keep tracking those inventory sites. They do come in and out. I've seen GameStop get a bunch here and there, but they go quickly. So if you're looking to buy one of these and you see one on a store shelf, or just quite a digital store shelf for that matter, you should absolutely buy one, because that ties in nicely to our next number. Coming from the NPD, they are saying the Xbox Series was the best-selling hardware platform in dollar sales for the month of June. Now, I know you're saying we're talking about July, but here's a June number. That's because they put this information out in July, because they get to do the analysis and do the trench digging and understand what is going on in the market. So that is another big win for Microsoft, the fact that they were outselling everything else in the month of June here in the US specific. Keep that in mind. Now, Nintendo did win the overall unit sales. They sold more units, but because they cost less, the revenue king went to Microsoft, which is interesting because we know that Sony is also having trouble getting their consoles, but Microsoft has the exact same trouble. And so it does look like, at least based on the NPD numbers, that Microsoft likely outsold the PlayStation in the month of June, but we don't quite know the full story yet, so we can't run with that information until Microsoft one day maybe unveils their actual console sales. But as of right now, all we know is that the PlayStation has sold 10 million. The best guess based on Nico Partners estimates put the Xbox hardware somewhere around 6.5, and if you've watched any of my other videos, you will know that that is actually a good thing, because we all expected that the gap between the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 was a 2-to-1, and so if it is 6.5 to 10, that's about a 15% increase over the previous generation on sales comparables, and that's a pretty big win for Microsoft overall. But anyways, it looks like the Xbox had a really good and strong and healthy month of June. Number 2, Xbox wants to expand its early access program. This came from a Phil Spencer interview, and this is such an off the radar thing that most people that they didn't really catch on, because I didn't see it in a lot of places, is that Microsoft really wants to help creators build new monetary models on the Xbox platform. What I mean by that is we see this on Steam with early access, where you can buy a game or quote unquote sort of donate, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, to a developer as they are building a title to get early access as the title moves along. This is really, really helpful to indie farms, or indie shops, I should say, that want to spin up a new title because they need the revenue and they don't want to have to go out to investors. They'd rather go directly to the gamers. it's a risky maneuver on multiple parts. It's risky from the developer because if they put out the title and people don't like where it's headed, they're not going to get the funding. And it's also risky for the potential user, which means you're putting money into a game that you know is absolutely not complete. But if you have faith in both parties, then things can work really, really well to launch titles that work effectively without involving third-party capital, and it's a better relationship for the gamer and the developer because they own the entire relationship and they're not beholden to investors on the outside. That being said, Microsoft has a similar program and they've tried things in the past, but it's pretty clear that Phil Spencer has much bigger ambitions to get early access, titles onto the Xbox platform, which again should expand the breadth of capabilities and abilities of gamers to access different types of content inside the Xbox universe. And the number one story from July is the story we didn't get. Microsoft did not share any Game Pass subscriber update numbers. We know it's somewhere, I want to say 22 to 25, actually probably 23 to 25, somewhere in there is what I keep hearing around the block. But Microsoft declined to share anything during their earnings release and through their earnings call, which is a little disappointing from a company who is saying, hey, judge us on our content and services revenue, not on our hardware sales, which is fair. That's Microsoft's point, and I tend to agree with that is the future and longevity because you don't want to judge them on their hardware sales when they also have things like Xbox cloud gaming available in the browser and on the phones, and you want to incorporate that into the overall narrative. But when Microsoft refuses to share Game Pass subscriber numbers, that gives us, it honestly just puts a little bit of shadow of a doubt over the strategy. Now, the CEO, Satya Nadella, did say they are all in on gaming in this most recent earnings call and conversations. That being said, if they truly are, more transparency into what is going on and the growth of the platform that we're supposed to be judging Xbox on would be significantly appreciated from people like me who are outside observers, because Microsoft is trying to grow this. They're trying to shift that narrative from Xbox Live, obviously, to Game Pass and Game Pass Ultimate. It'll be interesting to see what happens here now. We are in fiscal year 22. Microsoft is really going to be turning the gears on trying to get numbers up because now cloud gaming, which is another avenue to join Game Pass, is fully available or generally available in Microsoft speak. We also have this sort of odd egg sitting out on the shelf called Xbox Live. Now, we know Microsoft doesn't want to give up that revenue. They'd be crazy to give up that revenue. But at the same time, it's still a bit conflicting and the messaging doesn't quite make sense. I still think that they should just combine it all into one subscription and that should be it. But we will see. They could call it Xbox 365, which we all know why they're not going to call it that. Or maybe they will. Maybe they will just rip the Band-Aid off once it's gone by a little bit, because obviously the Xbox 360 console, now you have the 360, whatever you want to call it. But it would make more sense for Microsoft to actually combine these in a way that makes sense from a user and revenue perspective. I think the biggest challenge is that they are probably still making a decent amount of money from Xbox Live as a standalone SKU, and just lopping that off would be pretty scary for the Xbox org, I do imagine. So I bet there's some sort of merging and blending, but we'll see if that happens in fiscal year 22. I'm also still waiting to see what Microsoft's marketing messages are going to be for the holiday season, if they're going to be pushing people to buy consoles that they can't actually buy, which does not seem like a smart move, and it does seem like they should be pushing people towards Game Pass subscriptions, which they can go out and buy. So there you go, guys. That wraps it up. That is the 5 biggest stories that impacted Xbox in the month of July. And if you want to keep updated on everything going on in the world of Microsoft, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.